This video was brought to you by our book, Brexit, the Colouring Book. Go through the whole timeline with images and a TLDR summary in our 3rd edition book. And get 25% off using code DRIVERS. The link is down below. So, as we know, Johnson got Brexit done at the start of 2021, with the UK officially leaving the EU and entering into a new relationship with the Union. Things started okay, with many of the major fears not emerging, and things continuing broadly as normal. However, things have started to shift, with empty shelves becoming more common, supermarkets warning of major shortages as we head towards Christmas, and even restaurants unable to get enough food. Something we reported on our Instagram last week, which you really ought to follow us on. Anyway, we wanted to unpack what's going on here, and why some, even the Daily Mail, are calling for some major changes. It's worth starting this video by highlighting the extent of this issue, especially for people outside of the UK. You might hear stories of empty shelves in Britain and assume that shit has really hit the fan, but that's not quite true, although that's probably because fans are out of stock at the moment. No, seriously, the majority of British stores are pretty full, but this is still a growing concern because of how supermarket logistics work. You might imagine a pretty straight line between a friendly farmer and your supermarket shelf, but in this modern world, that line isn't as straight as you might think, and that farmer is often a faceless corporation. Horrifying edits aside, the point is that tons of products are stored and stockpiled in warehouses and cold stores across the country, and that's how seasonal foods are available year-round, except for the mythical cream egg, obviously. It's in these warehouses where the issues are starting to emerge, because while your shelves might still be packed, the Confederation of British Industry recently reported that stock levels in Britain's warehouses had reached their lowest levels since the CBI began surveying back in 1983. In fact, Asda's head of logistics recently remarked that the company was only just keeping their head above water. Co-op's head said that food shortages were the worst he'd ever seen, while Iceland and Tesco both warned that some families could see Christmas cancelled. Add to all of these calls, the chief exec of the Road Haulage Association warned that supermarkets are already reporting that they're not receiving their expected food stocks, and that we are weeks away from gaps on the shelves, with him warning that the disruption could extend beyond Christmas, raging on for at least 18 months. So what's causing this issue? Well, many are pointing their fingers towards disruption at the European border, and more specifically, the impacts of Brexit. Now, you could argue that this isn't a Brexit problem, instead caused by other factors like the pandemic. In fact, you could even show me pictures like this, where French supermarket shelves are also barren. The only issue with that argument is that these French shelves are normally full of British goods, and the rest of the store is completely unaffected. In fact, every country across Europe and around the world has had to deal with COVID, and yet shortages like the one we're seeing in the UK are pretty unique. So what's actually causing this disruption? Well, the common answer you're going to hear a lot of is a shortage of HGV drivers, the people who actually get the goods into your stores. The UK is currently experiencing a major shortage in HGV drivers, with estimates suggesting that there's a shortfall of about 100,000 drivers. Naturally, this is significantly impacting the country's supply chains, with some even speculating that the army could be put on standby to pick up the slack. Hiring new HGV drivers is proving difficult too. In July, ministers tried to counteract this issue by allowing existing drivers to work more hours, but many argued that doing so not only risked driver safety, but also made recruitment even harder. Something the RHA described as nothing more than a sticking plaster. Instead, many companies and industry bodies requested the government relax working restrictions on EU citizens. And this isn't a wild idea, really. The government already has a shortage occupation list, a list of jobs which the UK currently needs filling, and if HGV drivers were added to the list, then potential EU drivers could avoid post-Brexit immigration rules. According to industry bodies, this could tempt back the estimated 25,000 European HGV drivers who have left the country since the beginning of the transition period. warning that if they didn't, then supply chain disruption could push up prices and drive inflation for customers. Despite this pressure, the government resisted, maintaining post-Brexit rules. They did, however, encourage people to recruit new British drivers, with the business secretary telling business leaders that bringing back European workers would only be a short-term temporary solution, and instead insisted that with the UK's furlough scheme coming to an end on September 30th, there's likely to be more people looking for work soon. The government has also said that they will assist with training and apprenticeships to get Brits back into the driving seat. But not everyone's convinced this is enough, especially in the short term. Both the National Farmers Union and the Food and Drink Federation urged ministers on Friday to introduce a COVID recovery visa, which allows foreign workers in the UK to help the country bounce back from COVID and the economic impact of the last couple of years, with the chief exec of the Food and Drink Federation warning that food inflation could be between 6 and 9% this autumn alone if rising wages and supply chain issues drive up the price of getting goods on the shelves. However, the government seems unwilling to follow all of the business world's advice, sticking firmly to its Britain-first approach to the driver shortage, and not letting additional EU workers in. Interestingly though, Labour seem to somewhat agree. Their business secretary, Ed Miliband, accused the government of being asleep on the job and failing to prepare for this issue. But crucially, he hasn't called for EU workers to be allowed in, instead insisting that rather than passing the buck to businesses, ministers must take urgent measures to recruit and train workers to fill the gaps. Ultimately though, this issue extends far beyond just Brexit. This might be one of the first manifestations of the impact of European workers returning home, but they only make up part of the shortfall. A further 70 to 80,000 people with HGV licenses in the UK simply choose not to drive, with many dropping out due to complaints surrounding work conditions, stagnating wages, and the serious health implications of the job. Brexit may well have exacerbated this issue, but it's clearly one that needs rethinking, EU or not. So what do you think? How should the government react? And how do the Tories prevent food inflation, which would not only hit the poorest in society hard, potentially increasing poverty rates yet higher, but also protect their reputation with voters as strong with the economy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Before we finish, if you want 25% off our book, Brexit the Colouring Book, then be sure to use code DRIVERS. The new book features 25 total images from the entire Brexit story, taking you through the whole timeline and letting you colour and remember the history of the process. Find out more and buy your copy by clicking the link in the description. This offer ends on Thursday. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that is in the description.